Hello, I'm Hannah, and this is Hannah's Books. I have a lot of books to show you today from a couple of different sources, but I hope you will indulge me for just 1 second. I would like to get in touch with one of the amazing folks who leave me such beautiful comments, a person who seems to be having a YouTube problem right now. Ratty Rachel, if you see this video, would you please send me an email or perhaps an Instagram message or something like that? Down in the description box, I have my contact information. Thank you. Okay, onto the books. In my last video, I told you a little bit about my recent trip to Boston, where I got to visit Steve Donahue and his wonderful little dog, Frida, at Hyde Cottage. I had a lovely time talking with Steve, and I'll link down below to a little part of our evening conversation. Steve was not only full of smart and funny things to say, but he was kind enough to offer me a couple of beautiful sets of matching books. I'll show you one set today, these amazing pocket-sized hardbacks. I love their size, but I'm also amazed by how readable they are. Let me show you a few of them. Hand-sized. The print is large enough. The paper is smooth and white, and the margins are reasonable, etc. Some of these novels are favorites of mine already. Marilynne Robinson's Housekeeping. And I'm thrilled to have these lovely editions of them. And some of them will be totally new for me. Interestingly, these editions are throwing a bit of a wrench into my shelving habits. Usually, I house books together with other books by the same author, and then in groupings based on place and date. These are such special little books that I think they might need to stay together instead. What do you think? Well, I mentioned in my last video that my husband David and I traveled to Boston to see not only Steve, but our son Abraham, a college senior who directed a play that opened that weekend. The play was great, and down in the description box I'll link to a discussion of his vision for the play, which ran in his school newspaper. Hope you enjoy it. It was great to see Abe, and one of the many highlights of the time we spent with him was a trip downtown to introduce our bookish son to the amazing Brattle Bookshop, that amazing bookstore with the outdoor sale lot that Steve introduced me to during my last visit to Boston back in, I guess, the very end of August. This time I got to introduce Abe, who loved it as much as I did. He's talked about taking some of his friends there sometime in the future. Abe found a ton of fascinating books. As an English major with a serious commitment to theater, and as a Shakespeare nerd, he picked up a variety of plays, old and new, a silly book about Shakespeare by his favorite comedy troupe, an academic book that seems absolutely perfect to add to his sources for his senior thesis, a book about the history of English by a scholar he admires, and a funny little book I loved when it was published about literary criticism. Right now, Abe is immersed in an upper-level class about experimental criticism, so perhaps he will have to write an update. My son also found a handful of books to give as gifts to some of his friends. I'll not post pictures of most of them, but one set, I think for an operatic friend who's graduating this winter, is this beautiful collection of stories from the Ring Cycle. Perhaps because I was so pleased with the book sets from Steve and also the ones Abe found, I was briefly tempted by this lovely collection I spotted in the sale lot. These are short biographies written by well-known authors, and now that I'm looking at this photograph of the collection, I do wish I had picked up just a couple of them. Somehow at the time, I felt I would have to give a home to the whole set just to avoid breaking them up, so I passed. One biography I did not pass up was by the great author Hermione Lee. Penelope Fitzgerald, A Life. If you watched my last Brattle Book Haul, you might remember that I found a copy of a collection of Fitzgerald's essays and criticism, and several of you commented that I should keep my eyes peeled for the Hermione Lee biography of her. As Steve would probably say, the Brattle will provide. I was extremely pleased to see this on the cart on this visit. The next book is by another great biographer, Victoria Glendinning, and is a study of the life of Vita Sackville-West. I haven't read any of Sackville-West's books since I was right out of college, but my recent immersion in the fiction of Virginia Woolf definitely makes me want to reconsider both the fiction and the biography of Sackville-West. Have any of you read this particular book? What'd you think? I'm also really intrigued by the book about her home by Adam Nicholson. Next time I'm at the Brattle, I'll be hoping to find a copy of it. Here is another book I was absolutely thrilled to run across this month. Used and Rare, Travels in the Book World by Lawrence and Nancy Goldstone. When I made a nonfiction November TBR full of books about books, one of you recommended the work of the Goldstones, writers I had never heard of before. This book is about their time together, collecting rare books around the world. From what I hear, the story deals with not only the quest for rare books, but the whole idea of the book as object. Things like whether a book is a first edition, or whether a book contains a signature of the author or a famous owner of the book, or perhaps some special notes in the margin. And it also shows the deep love for literature in general that the Goldstones share. Sounds lovely. Perhaps because of the presence of a cricket-sized version of Steve Donahue sitting on my shoulder as I browsed through the carts, I definitely had Proust on the brain. Was it Prousttober he was planning for? Proustvember? Proustgiving? Proustmas? Who knows? I won't be joining him in 2021, but I think I might try to read at least Swan's Way sometime in 2022. Since I joked about holiday timing, perhaps I'll start the book over the Jewish holiday in the spring and call my readathon Proustover. At any rate, I picked up a copy of Proust's Binoculars, a study of memory, time, and recognition in Search of Lost Time by Roger Shattuck. Some time ago, I enjoyed Shattuck's The Banquet Years, the origins of the avant-garde in France from 1885 to World War I, which I remember startlingly little about. And Shattuck is also well known for his more recent Proust book, Proust's Way, a field guide to In Search of Lost Time, which I've not yet read but was lucky to find in a local little free library a couple of years ago. And I picked up another really interesting Proust book. When I was talking about the Goldstone account of collecting used and rare books, I mentioned the textual notes written by someone famous or someone with something to say can be valuable. I don't know that the ones I found are valuable in a financial sense, but they're fascinating. I picked up an edition of Proust's Swan's Way, annotated by William C. Carter, but what makes this particular edition really interesting is that the annotated edition is in fact heavily annotated itself by James Connolly, one of the contributors to Proust Inc. and a member of the Proust Society run out of the Boston Athenaeum. Many people have talked about the presence of art in Proust's writing, and it seems from my quick peeks through the volume that Connolly's handwritten annotations are especially targeted to musical references. Let me show you a few of the pages. I suspect that the rest of the annotated Proust volumes are likely to appear on the shelves at the Brattle at some point, but I think if I had seen them all together, I would not have wanted to purchase them all, and not wanting to split them up either. So I guess I'm glad the full set was not there. These annotations, on top of annotations, are fascinating, but I don't think they would make a good reading copy for a newbie, as I basically am, so I may have to hold them until I've read through the basic text at least once. The next find was a wonderful surprise and a book I've considered buying in new bookstores many a time. The book is the collected stories of John Cheever. And the person who really convinced me that I might really like Cheever's writing is BookTube's own brilliant Too Tight Lautrec, whose channel I will link to below. Brian at Bookish, in one of his recent tags, was talking about how much he enjoyed short stories, and while many readers seem not to especially enjoy that kind of work, I too am a huge short story fan. And I'm thrilled to add this volume to my collection. If you have any favorite Cheever stories to recommend, please let me know. And by you, I mean Too Tight, but also any of you who are Cheever fans. Clearly, the theme of this visit was some combination of books I've been hoping to find and books that made me think of Steve Donahue. The next one is both. For years, I've been thinking I needed to read Cultural Amnesia, Necessary Memories from History and the Arts by Clive James. But what really pushed me over was the adorable edition that used to be regularly in view on one of Steve's shelves. What I found was not that edition, sadly I guess, but it is a sturdy edition of the book. In fact, at some point not too long ago, I think I asked Steve to pick up a used copy of Cultural Amnesia for me if he happened to stumble across one at the Brattle. You can check that off your list, Steve. When I asked him, I was thinking about trying to read a chapter or so a week of James's book during 2022. But after my miserable failure trying the essay a week from another long literary book during 2021, I'm not sure that's the best way for me to go about it. Two of the books I purchased, I now realize are going to be very low on my priority list, even though both sound wonderful. Without completely realizing it, I bought these primarily because they seem like books Steve might pick up for himself, if he doesn't already own them, that is, for his Books About Books bookcase. So Steve, if you want either of these volumes, please let me know, and I will either mail them to you or bring them to you next time I'm in Boston. So here they are. First is a biography by Clive Fisher called Cyril Connolly, The Life and Times of England's Most Controversial Literary Critic. I'm afraid I haven't read Connolly's criticism at all, so perhaps I should look at that a bit first, especially if I can find it in the library. From what it looks like from the tiny bit I have poked into this book, it seems like Connolly led a fairly sad life. He was known for what sounds like a brilliant but pretty idiosyncratic review style, and for being, as we used to say, a bit of an Eeyore, obsessed with his own failures and limitations. The second potential Steve book is Firebrand, The Life of Horace Liveright, the Man Who Changed Publishing, written by Tom Tardis. Right around the time of the end of World War I, Liveright entered the world of publishing, right about the same time that Alfred Knopf got started too. Both became huge forces in American publishing. In addition to getting the modern library books off the ground, his name graces what I guess is now a W. W. Norton imprint with an amazing list. Liveright is remembered for his fight against censorship, as well as his effort to publish some of the tremendous authors of his generation. Well, I am not even going to try to make a Steve pyramid for this video, and I'm not at all sure where all these books are going to be shelved either, since I really have almost no more room for books at this point, despite the flow that keeps coming in our house from friends and used bookstores and little free libraries, but also from publishers and review venues. And of course, Even more than bookshelf space, I need more time to read. Well, that will do it for today. Thank you all so much for joining me here on Hannah's Books. See you soon.